yeah, real short intro. So it's that time of year when I'm getting bombarded with all sorts of marketing. Mostly for things that I want, because the internet's figured out how to send me information that I like, apparently. And one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of lately is VR headsets. And it's interesting because I was interested in VR headsets, pretty keenly last year around this time, but I never pressed go on anything. And for whatever reason, I didn't see anything about it all year. And then now it's just like, hey guys, we've got this new entry into the market. It's affordable. It looks real good. I think it's crazy how that works. Like the internet knows that it's cold out and I'm not going to go anywhere, so it's not trying to make me do anything. Like, no, stay inside where it's warm. Put this thing on and look at the internet. When really all I want to do is fly airplanes and be able to look around.
Well, I think that's on that note. I do notice that, like, as the weather gets colder, the more simulators I break out, and like knowing that is more so like, oh, I just put up the steering wheel and the HOTAS stick on the shelf basically for like a couple months, knowing that when winter hits and then it's like too cold to do anything, because I kept looking outside and I'm like, I could really take out an RC, and then I would look and see the wind is like 14 miles an hour. And it says it feels like it's 4 degrees, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah, when I look out the window and I see snow in shaded areas, and then I look at the few remaining leaves and they're just like blowing real hard. I just don't want to go outside in that.
Well, it's like yesterday it was snowing sideways, and I'm like, do I really want to go outside?
Yeah, man, I think there's something to be said for when you can see wind in terms of particles that we would normally see modeled in a computer, but they're like actually visible in real life. When we can experience fluid dynamics like that, that's definitely like a sign not to go out into that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it's something like a sandstorm, it's even worse. But I feel like a blizzard is one of those things that you almost feel like I could do that, and then you get out there, and next thing you know, you're suffering from like edema.
Yeah. Man, a sandstorm has to hurt so bad.
Ugh.
Like, just the idea of getting hit with tiny shards of glass at a high speed. Or like getting it in your eyes, like,
Or just being buried by sand.
yeah, that's some shit where you would think it wouldn't be that easy to happen. But I mean, I guess first off, nobody should be going near that much sand willingly, unless you're like born there. Don't go near that much sand. Just stay away.
That's like the thing that I've always read that's like consistent about all reports about visiting like the moon or potentially visiting Mars is that the stuff that exists on those bodies is unlike anything on Earth. Like the stuff on the moon, it just gets into everything and gums everything up, and it also causes the fabrics to deteriorate. And then the stuff on Mars is like basically rust, like tiny flakes of rust flying. Oh, granted, the storms don't move that fast. Like the wind on Mars is real slow, but it's still, that's the kind of thing that would accumulate. I'm pretty sure it's radioactive. Like everything else on Mars's surface is radioactive, so that's going to get everywhere. It just seems like the more anytime I read about the idea of going to Mars, sending humans to Mars, like this still isn't a good idea.
No, it's a terrible idea. I don't know when, at whatever point, people started taking Elon seriously on the idea that it's a good idea. Um, but repeatedly, actual scientists have come out and been like, "It's not going to happen," but it's just a terrible idea. Like we shouldn't even really be thinking about settling another planet, and we should really only be thinking about fixing this one
I mean,
like 100%.
the idea that we have to we have to make Mars habitable because somehow we've screwed up Earth so bad, and we are able to fix Mars, but somehow unable to fix the Earth because we fucked it up so bad. That's just like, what kind of world are these motherfuckers preparing for?
I mean, I think you just laid it out in the most plain way in that when you I wish somebody could like just plaster that across like billboards across the country where I'm like, "Oh, it takes really simple frameworks for people to understand things." And it's like, yeah, obviously if we can't fix this one, there's no way we're going to be able to rehabilitate one that's so far beyond what this one is. So why wouldn't we just focus on, okay, let's say we want, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say we eventually get there. Why don't we just test all that shit out here and clean up the environment and clean all of the pollutants out of the atmosphere to prove that it's possible to establish an atmosphere on Mars that is also not going to be completely radioactive based on them probably detonating a bunch of fucking nukes to do it. Like I know Americans and they just bomb shit. That's how they do things.
I
So
thought the
I
plan was
imagine
to harness the sun and blast Mars with lasers till they could activate the atmosphere.
I mean, I hadn't looked at the actual plans because any of them are probably
they're all
asinine
they're all
and
just as crazy.
completely Rick and Morty type shit where you're like, oh yeah, you've been taking too many drugs and staying up too late at night and think this is viable.
You know, if they've found space weed, like a reliable source of space weed, they're not sharing it with the rest of the planet. That just makes them dicks. Ugh. You know, the problem I think though is that it's all inundated with science fiction. All of the space travel ideas are sound like they sound like bad anime actually. Let's blast Mars with lasers until we can finish terraforming or create an atmosphere. Warm it
Well,
up.
and it's not particularly good science fiction that they're using, which is I think part of the problem.
They're taking a trope from science fiction, but not just science fiction, like the most anxiety driven, emotionally frustrated science fiction.
Well, yeah, and it's like they took they took all the wrong lessons from the not the worst, but in some cases, like for example, Terminator, some of the earliest I don't want to say big budget because it wasn't like a huge budget. But when there's not a lot of other competition, so a film gets a big focus. There haven't been too many times in history where like Terminator came through and was like a major focus because there wasn't anything really like in that vein with which it was competing at the in the same year. And then Terminator 2 came out and they had figured out how to do the album um promotion with the music video promotion. So Terminator 2 became a phenomenon. And so in that, I think you had these people who could take all these different things out of Terminator 2 that it was much now it almost feels like much more binary in the first one in that you either kind of got it or apparently the people who didn't get it got the wrong messages and were like, oh, we need to build fucking T800s and T900s and
I mean, obviously that was the message they got.
it's like, wouldn't it be cool if we actually built a T800, man? It's like, no, that's the wrong fucking
I
message,
think the other
dude. Like,
message they got was like, ugh, those scientists were such idiots. If they'd only done these things, they totally could have gotten it right. We should just do those things too and we'll get it right. Actually, I think for the past few years now, anytime I have like a substantial conversation with anyone about Terminator, I like to ask, how many times do you think that this thing has happened? Because I think it's like a continuum that's happened, potentially thousands of times. And I know
right,
we've
that's what
talked about
the
that.
Vedas say.
Yeah, and that's we've talked about that before, which is like I think that's really important because there's no real indicator as to how many times it's happened, except every movie the Terminator itself becomes way more sophisticated physically, just the mechanics of the current iteration of the Terminator. That's pretty amazing stuff. And how many times has this happened? Like within whatever time frame that they are able to establish time travel and send something back. Because from what I've gathered from just the movies is that every time the humans win, the period of the point in history that the machines are able to create the time machine keeps getting moved further into the future. But the point of contention is still, apparently John Connor and his mom, and then there's this new character that they've introduced because Linda Hamilton's getting pretty old to be chased by a machine. I think that's one of the complexities of the continuum itself is that what was that one Terminator Genesis, the female actress in Game of Thrones was Sarah Connor. She did fine. She did a good job. That was an extremely advanced, extremely sophisticated Terminator. It took a human and traveled through time and then built its own Terminator facility. Sold everyone smartphones. I think that movie was actually really clever because it played into the fears of being surveilled all the time. And just came out and said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're surveilling you all the time." I don't think Skynet would need to be violent. I think Skynet would be able to control all the markets and just get people to do what it needs to do to produce the technologies to get it closer to its end goal without ever revealing that it's sentient or exists.
Yeah.
Skynet's not dumb.
No, and that's kind of like what I think it was Dennis McKenna, or it was either Dennis McKenna or Timothy Leary who was talking about that as their kind of framework, which Joe Rogan would always reference. But it's like those those were meant to be lessons as to why we shouldn't treat machines like slaves. And it's like everybody got all the wrong messages and we're like, oh, machines can make the perfect slaves. And then if they're sentient, they can know they're slaves. And then we can feel superior to them. And it's like we have a culture that inherently sees value in the way people have hierarchies, and then they want to create these machines that are stupidly in the image of man, but then want to make them better, but then also put them in these servant roles. And it's like every fucking, it's just exhausting how many times this sci-fi story has been told as like an example as to why you don't do that. Like even Alien Romulus.
Okay, so
Alien Romulus.
That's probably one of the best alien stories.
It's really good,
It's
and
one
but
of the
it's
best
also
alien stories. It's like
one of the best AI or one of the best cybernetic organism stories, which they've been trying to do the whole time as part of the alien and as part of the evolutionary tale, but it flies over like most of the audience, and which is where the notion of the like alien predator Blade Runner universe slash in parentheses Terminator is like,
you also have to include Soldier with
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. That's right. Um,
he's included in this universe. You know.
I mean, and if we really wanted to like be pedantic, we could include Time Cop, the one, and the Dark Tower, and actually make a cohesive narrative out of it.
Yeah,
Because some of these stories are like time loops. Because then it's like,
I think Time
uh,
Cop definitely belongs, and the one definitely belongs.
right, but it would be just like tangential time loops, and then Dark Tower is like at the center of it. And this is like the type of shit I've thought about in terms of like, if the gods are meant to be representative of the zeitgeist and specific aspects of the zeitgeist, and they're used to sort of like focus those energies, they would obviously morph into modern times. And some of the stronger ones, like Thor, for example, wouldn't morph that much. Um, or ones that have more weight to them or more like zeitgeist energy or whatever it is in terms of
Uh, uh,
like,
Quantum and temporal stability.
right, but in this context, like for example, if you would like look at the differences, Jesus has way more than Thor, who has way more than
Spider-Man.
um Spider-Man or Bruce Wayne, but that's only because Bruce Wayne is like 100 about to be 100 years old. So over time, Bruce Wayne may end up surpassing Thor and may end up surpassing Jesus Christ, but we need like a 2,000 year or 4,000 year scale to see. And so even down to like Superman being a Moses allegory, it's like, well, can you really disconnect Superman from Moses? In the Superman is like a sub construct of Moses. So in that, there's all these things concerning how ideas and how values have morphed over time in society. And like, we see, the further you look back, the further you can see the ones that have been more stable because of what, for whatever reason. But that's where I'm like, if in that juxtaposition, like the ones that stand out to me are the ones like Thor or Hercules or Heracles, who've been able to persist between multiple cultures and then in multiple forms of media, um, and have that relevance to like different age groups and different times. And so, in that context, when you have a group of people who are trained not to look backwards and don't understand any of that and are introduced these condensed, watered down versions of those concepts from the zeitgeist, that's where to me you end up with a population that feels like they're informed and feels like they think they know better when it's the discussion of whether we should go to Mars or not. But it's like they can't tell, they none of these people know the emperor wears no clothes story well enough to understand
I think I
Like
think most people
Elon.
think that they would be the person that survives the encounter with the xenomorph.
Yeah,
We
I
have a
think
we have a,
that's
we have a
true.
couple of archetype. Well, we have an archetype for the person that survives the xenomorph, and that's why they keep revisiting that character with different faces and slight modifications to personality and garb and equipment and all that stuff and their travel companions. But even when we're given space marines, like a variety of space marines, they all fall to the xenomorph. They had to clone Ripley because they couldn't solve the problem. And in essence, even through Prometheus and Covenant and Romulus, now they've
I
kind of
mean,
replicated the character of Ripley, like the personality that survives.
well, and that's where I'm like, I don't know if it was ever made clear that the air quote original Ripley wasn't a clone either.
Yeah,
I thought that was part of the mystery in that they had the Ripley program going for a while, so it was like,
yeah. If we can't build replicants, we'll just clone the best humans.
yeah.
That's totally a Wayland or a Yutani level of decision making. Oh, they passed a law. Well, let's just go do this then. We can do it. We can do it out the beyond the outer rim. Nobody will even know.
Well, because that's where what is it, Resurrection?
Yeah,
It was like not well received, widely panned, and for a lot of reasons the movie doesn't hold up, but the plot
it,
tied everything together
it doesn't
ultimately.
hold up because visually it contains way too much poor CGI,
Yeah.
and so the visual effects are inconsistent throughout the film, and I just want to say that it's the comedy of the series. It's the only one to me that actually rises to the level of telling jokes or creating scenarios that are funny. Like every
Yeah.
other one is a serious as fuck horror story, but Resurrection, there are these moments where you find yourself snickering because
Yeah, it's definitely like a comedy
yeah,
almost.
they set some characters up for like these really gruesome deaths, and you don't even flinch, just like, oh yeah, take that, you bastard, and because you feel like they deserved it. So they do a real good job of creating these like characters that you want to see the xenomorphs just kill. And so I think on that level, it's actually really good. They did a good job of that.
Well, they did that in Prometheus as well, in
Yeah.
terms of like, I feel like they carried that forward, but used it more sparingly, even down to like Danny McBride being, I thought he was like well utilized in that nobody really plays him straight, and then letting everybody off of Danny McBride play the like joke, and then it like sets the audience up for this expectation, and it like you're like waiting for Danny McBride to deliver a joke, and then somebody else comes in and is the punchline, and then it catches you off guard. And I thought that was really well done. Um, and even and so this is where like what I also liked about Romulus is, even though I think it's a different director, but it's like it's getting back to low budget feel without looking low budget, in that the final act is largely practical effects.
Yeah.
And even down to the alien, it's just like a super tall dude in a fucking
Oh
costume.
yeah, rubber suit. I think that's the brilliance of the alien focused stories, the alien the xenomorph in space stories, is that it all takes place in a couple rooms and a couple hallways, and there might be some vacuum of space involved. There might be an
Mm-hmm.
explosion. People are definitely going to get chased through a hallway. They should be able to run through relatively quickly, but they're not going to be able to avoid some boxes that are just in the room. So they do a good job of all that. That's like that whole like even though they're with people, they're isolated. It's just them and the room, and who knows what's coming out of that shadow. And I think that like the thing that Romulus did so well was the swarm of facehuggers.
Yeah, and that I
That
feel
was
like
whoa.
face huggers would be more likely to swarm, but xenomorphs would be the ones that made it. And so it's like you wouldn't think that they would swarm like they do in Alien vs. Predator or
No.
Aliens for that matter.
The facehuggers
Um,
swarm, and then the bigger xenomorphs move in and do the heavy lifting, and then protect the egg room
yeah,
or the incubation chamber until a queen is formed, and then it starts laying eggs to form more chest bursters. It's a vicious cycle.
yeah.
I don't think that the xenomorphs are. I mean, I think they're definitely as aggressive as portrayed in like Aliens because a bunch of humans just walked into their nest. Of course, they're going to be aggressive. Like ants are aggressive if you get too close to their nest. Any insect is like that. So why would a really vicious space alien killing machine be any different?
Well, and I thought that was a really good addition to the lore, which when we're looking at the series in the grand scheme, and then also like Raised by Wolves, it's clear obviously Ridley Scott is like really into exploring evolution and like the idea of what that looks like over time and if evolution is a moral act or a moral process and if morality is like a tool that helps or hinders and where communication lies in all of this because I think um what was it David, I think it was David that was communicating with the Xeno that he had like raised in Elizabeth Shaw. um I don't know if it was the specific one, but he was trying to do experiments to basically create a xenomorph in the way that Waylon created him.
So that there's that whole moment in Covenant when the captain of the colony ship is like David's leading him into the egg room, and it's one of those like, oh come on, man, you got to know better than to look inside some weird egg shaped trash can looking thing that has lips and is clearly opening up. That's like the first rule of exploring shit. You avoid things that look like they have something in them. How would they let
Well,
that?
but also I think that's true. But I think one of the things that keeps repeatedly like, okay, there is this undercurrent of
I guess I
two
know that
things.
because I've seen Alien and I saw what happened in the first film to the guy that looked inside the fluttering lip egg thing. And so
Right. No, no,
to
no.
me, it's
So
obvious. It's like, no, man, don't look in there.
no, that's not wrong, but there's an undercurrent of multiple things happening at once in that the movies are focused on the alien and alien, like that's what's beaten into our head, and like we're shown the acts 1, 2, and 3, and by the end of act 3 we're so focused on what's usually a Ripley or a Ripley variant or clone or an adaptation in another form of a character versus a xenomorph, as if that's the protagonist versus the antagonist, when in reality it's always like one of these bait and switch. Wayland Utani was the actual antagonist the whole time, and it's obvious, but it's like in the process they have to do certain things to set it up, and so it looks like they're sending the best and the brightest, but like there's aspects of it where you're like there's something off here. Well, they're the best and the brightest, but they're also the most naive. because they're willing to take this contract, thinking that they're not being exploited, and thinking that like
How long until we
they're
get
gonna
an
get one
alien
over.
story where the humans are the aliens? Or we finally acknowledge, because like, in Romulus, it's pretty obvious to me that humans don't belong on that mining
I mean,
planet.
it's been there the whole time. And this is where I'm getting at in terms of like what they frame is like they always put a person who works for Weyland Yutani or Weyland Corp on the in the
In the room, they're
cast.
just in the room somewhere.
They're in the cast. They won't even necessarily be in the room. Sometimes they're on the ship. Sometimes they're
Sometimes
in
they
the
are the
space.
ship.
Right, exactly right. And so this is always functioning as the counter humanity that HAL 9000 played in 2001, in that there's like the humanity side that wants to move it forward, but there's the humanity side that's like, I don't care if that means I have to sacrifice every other human for me to only move forward. And that's the real villain that actually puts everybody in danger every single time. It's not the alien, it's not the xenomorph, it's not the face hugger. It's this human that works for the corporation that is willing to take everybody in the crew and fucking turn them into experiment, making them think this is gonna be their biggest payday. They were never ever meant to come home in any situation. They were always part of an experiment, and we only find that out later. Which again, that's where I'm like, the way they weave everything together, then we don't know where the experiment starts and stops, which I think is genius. So we're to assume that the original Ripley is not a clone and is the original from which they established the baseline best, air quote, best human, but she might have been a genetic project from the very beginning and was never like a naturally born human, and was like always constructed to try to be the human that was the proper womb for the xenomorph in which to grow to become the next stage of human slash xenomorph evolution. Because that's what, to me, it really felt like Romulus did what Resurrection tried to do but couldn't really accomplish without making itself a joke and taking out the like, it wasn't really scary because like you said, the CGI was bad, the practical effects were bad. And so in act 3 of Resurrection, it's like everybody's laughing their asses off, like, when is this going to be over? Whereas Romulus really, it keeps the, if it's not even really scary so much as it keeps the anticipation, like, where is this going, what's going to happen next? And you actually like are invested in the characters in a way that,
Oh man, when the newborn, like, emptied the mom like a juice bag,
yeah.
like a Capri Sun pouch. That was a very interesting, like, man, this thing moves quick moment.
Mm-hmm.
And but it didn't. It moved so slowly. It just kind of lumbered around because it wasn't old enough to be really coordinated. Maybe, I don't know. That was a very interesting variation of the xenomorph. Extremely, like, very, very different. I'm glad that we got to see xenomorphs doing their thing, because that's kind of, the gold standard. We need to see those things move around to feel like that kind of um, impending doom. But I really like that they included something different. I think that's like the best part about like Prometheus and Covenant and Romulus, is that they're giving us more. They're giving us different. They're revealing what's behind this next curtain.
Well,
It's like
and
one of
with
the few franchises that despite its the few entries that are questionable, like the whole versus Predators portion and Resurrection, they're all
The
still good entries. They all still fill in gaps. They all still do the same thing of delivering on the promise of this, humans, you know, there's always one person who actually has what it takes to survive, and we get to see how long people can hold on to their humanity. And so they're
right.
they're they're really good at revealing, you know what it takes to rise up and be the hero. And I think that's a good thing. So there's still a protagonist. I think it's Alien versus Predator, the first one in the ice cave. That had really good visual effects. I think that was the first time that we actually saw the face huggers proboscis like do its thing coming out of the thing. I think that was like one of those moments where it's like, did they really just show that? Because it happened so quickly.
It's really funny in that Romulus, I feel like, has been the most overtly vaginal
Oh yeah, that
and phallic
that sack.
without being like sexual in the I don't think there was any sex scenes, right?
No.
Because there was totally one, at least one in Prometheus, almost one in Covenant. Maybe they even had one that was cut. They almost had two in Prometheus. Now that I think about it,
Yeah, so I was actually
oh no,
thinking
there was almost three. I think there was two.
slightly related. The other day, I was thinking about how the complexities of like a colony ship or a seed ship or a long distance, large group of people traveling to another body in the cosmos type situation. There's no reproduction happening. They have to calculate how many resources they take. They can't have another person just appear randomly. It's totally irresponsible for astronauts to be doing that shit. I know it's going to happen because humans are human and they do human things, but
No, and this is where I'm getting at in terms of like those are the little aspects of it where we see that they're not actually the best of the best because they train astronauts specifically so things like that don't happen. And so like if somebody's isolated for fucking 4 or 5 months at a time, we need to make sure they're not gonna go crazy. We need to make sure they're not gonna try to fuck everybody regardless of the sex. So all those types of things that they do now that the multiple crews that Wayland sent didn't do multiple times is like that's part of how we know these people are like
just contractors.
yes and not the best because of capitalism. And this is where again capitalism becomes like it rears its ugly head as being the actual villain of the entire franchise the whole time for things like this where because then it's like yeah you would think these people wouldn't look in the fucking face of a goddamn alien that they've never seen before that's rearing up looking like it's about to attack it. But that's the premise that starts off Prometheus, where we're like, okay, this guy's a fucking moron. How did he get this job? Well, he's smoking weed on the fucking job. And he's goddamn he is smart enough to make a bong inside of his fucking spacesuit, but not smart enough to get close to a fucking shitty like alien that's about to kill him. That's the type of contractor we're dealing with.
You know, back in the 80s, there was a show about a private contractor who started actually the first episode he was a secret agent. His name was Angus MacGyver. And that dude is the exact kind of private contractor we want to send into space, because they would know not to look into the mouth of a lipped alien egg thing that's rearing up on them, and they would know how to build a bong into their spacesuit. But we can't even have that kind of MacGyver anymore. When they rebooted MacGyver, they gave him a gun, and he used it like right out the gate. And then they also made one of the side characters from the original series into like a main character. So they can't even reboot a template that's like perfect. Don't do anything. Just reboot the character. Put him in modern situations. Make him solve stuff with a paper clip, a chewing gum wrapper, and an avocado, like the old days.
Well, that's when, somebody who is an executive doesn't know the spirit of whatever they bought
Yeah.
and are trying to reboot.
MacGyver didn't need a gun. He only resorted to like violence when it was absolutely the last resort. And when he did, he like punched him once in the face, like gave him the big fist, and they were out because that show had kind of a sense of reality to it. Like, yeah, you can really only get socked in the face by somebody who means it once if they make contact. And he had such good plot armor that he would evade incoming fists, and he would completely land the big fist in his adversary's glass jaw. He would find the glass jaw spot and knock him out.
So, on that note, did you ever watch SG-1?
Actually, yeah, I watched all of the Stargate stuff. Probably
I
too
feel
much.
like a lot of Jack Reacher is based off Colonel Jack O'Neill, but like take Jack O'Neill and give him steroids. That's what it feels like to me.
Well, I think. See, what's the guy, Lee something or other? Um, Lee Child, yeah. When did that series start?
Well, and that's another, like the way they tried to take it and then turn it into Atlantis and
So 97. When does Stargate happen?
well, they had the movie.
94.
Yeah, they had the movie before the TV series.
Series is in 97, and
Because then, what was it? Kurt Russell, I think, was the original Jack O'Neill, and then Richard Dean Anderson definitely was like doing a Kurt Russell, doing Jack O'Neill, 1,000%.
I think he was trying to do his best to not do MacGyver.
Well, part of it is like Jack O'Neill is hard on the outside, the softest person on the inside, but you like don't know his full backstory.
He's a Milky Way candy bar.
Right. So I think that's why Richard Dean Anderson was really good at it, but also Kurt Russell fucking really nailed it.
I think Kurt Russell made it very clear how serious what they were doing was. I think that they had to take that framework and turn that into a series, and they did a great job.
They did a good job.
They created characters that spanned, a primary series and then 3 additional spin-offs.
Well, and they did a really good job of taking characters from the movie and integrating them into the TV show as well as possible with as many actors as possible. Which I'm like, some of those people, I don't know if they ever went on to work again, but they definitely like employed a lot of people.
That's a show where each season had like, I think at least 22 or 23, sometimes 26 episodes, and they went on for 10 seasons. So, the main characters like Richard Dean Anderson, I think he skipped out a few seasons, but like Amanda Tapping and Christopher Judge, like they were there like the whole time. They don't have to do anything ever again. And they were also in the spin-off series, like as, either for entire seasons in Amanda Tapping's case. And like Christopher Judge is like a recurring character.
Well, you can tell that they didn't have to really do anything because they both started doing side quests, and like you would see Amanda Tapping pop up on like ghost hunting shows. And like
that's just for fun.
Right. Christopher Judge did God of War fucking Kratos voice and like won all these awards and shit. And it's like he didn't have to do that. he definitely didn't have to do that. Because I think he played. I want to say he played in NFL at some point, or maybe he was like drafted. Like he could have done a lot of things basically.
Yeah, he's great. He's got
But
a
then
great
also,
voice too.
I didn't like you see his hair, and you're like, what the fuck kind of hairstyles does he have? Well, the motherfucker is like part Cherokee, is what it is. And then you're like, oh, everything makes sense.
Dude, he's a voice in a ton of video games.
Right. Oh yeah. Um, well, because it's like you're saying, they ran for so long that some of the people got
Holy shit,
bored.
he was the voice of Magneto in X-Men Evolution.
I did not know that.
18, that's even cooler.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's super cool. Holy crap. That means he's in the Pantheon. They could have him as an alternate reality Magneto in MCU.
Now we need to like, yeah, put
This
that in that
this,
guy.
this has to happen. Like he'd be a fucking great Magnetus
Is
or
Evolution
Magnus is the
the
voice they gave him.
Joss Whedon one?
Evolution is um George Mayer, Mike Rhesus, Mike Scully. Not seeing no. I don't think so. No. Yeah, other than Christopher Judge, there's a whole bunch of names that I don't recognize as the cast for this series. I didn't watch Evolution. Huh. He was on MacGyver back in 1990. That was his first acting role, actually. At least that's on IMDb.
Right. I mean,
Fuck yeah, go Chris Judge, go. He was on He-Man, dude. He's he's a voice in Turok. What else? Max Steel, Dead Space, Dark Knight Rises. Mega Shark versus Mecha Shark. Sharknado 3.
right.
StarCraft
He
2.
didn't have to do any of that.
No, this is he does this stuff for fun. World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth.
Well, and that's like Lance Reddick
He's
did a
the
bunch of
voice of
games too.
T'Challa in Marvel's of 2020's Marvel Avengers video game.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
Oh, he's in Final Space. Okay, so Final Space is one of my
Yeah.
random like I truly appreciate this,
He's
this
Magneto and
animated.
T'Challa.
That's super bad. That's super badass. He does a lot of things, but like Final Space is this what I believe to be a very underrated animated miniseries. It's a story where the bad guys win, and I think that's probably why people don't like it. It's very serious. It looks like a cartoon. There's a lot of cartoony shit that happens, but it's like, you know, soul wrenching, heartstring pulling scenarios that play out. And they do a really good job of presenting this insurmountable force.
Oh yeah, I think I watched one episode of that, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And never watched another episode.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you got to know what you're getting into and like, be ready because it's a roller coaster.
It was like I thought it was like pitched as a comedy, and it's like, oh, this isn't really funny.
It's a dark comedy at best, but it's really a drama that dressed as cartoon. And so they can get away with all sorts of stuff that happens in cartoons, like space battles. But
this might be the first thing Fred Armisen has made that I didn't really like.
Yeah, I hate his character. they gave him a character that is Kevin is the name. He's like a insanity avoidance companion robot, but he's just nerve wracking.
What? This
Yeah,
cast is amazing.
yeah, it's got a great cast.
I
It's
can't believe I didn't like this.
you have to give it another chance
I don't know
because
if I can.
you just got
I want to
to.
see all these people in this. It's got really high ratings, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
It's hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's the kind of thing that they leverage the animation medium to get away with things that they really couldn't do with human actors.
And I don't like, okay, and this is another thing. The way this animation looks, this gets back to the earlier notion of it. This is the type of animation that I feel like is making Americans dumber. Like looking at this type of shit, in that it's easy to pump out some of the characters. Some of the stuff is more detailed to make it feel like it's a high level of quality, but the 4K sheen and the like CGI fight scenes are like gloss on a turd, in that the animation is just fucking ugly. So that's where, I mean, of course people have their preferences, but like this is clearly for adults.
Yeah, it's definitely not a kids show.
But the animation is not clear in that. This is like, for the animation looks like it's for an adult that only eats chicken nuggets and French fries.
But it's really not. Like,
I mean, I'm sure the show's material, like
I mean, the story itself,
subject matter is not.
The
but I'm
story
talking
is
purely
definitely
about the visual. Like, this looks like I said,
really,
like
this is for Saturday morning kids. Time. That's
somebody.
That's the kind of animation that it looks like to me when I first watched it.
Well, it looks like somebody who,
like, this is the kind of thing
Salvador Dali posters in college, and that's all. That's the farthest they ever got with interacting with visual art. Like maybe a couple MC Eschers.
No, it's definitely not about the illustrations.
Well, and that's where I'm like, it don't have to be about the illustrations, but this just looks, most of it looks dialed in, where then the other stuff that's not dialed in looks like overcompensating to distract you from the fact that the other stuff is dialed in, or just like underbaked. And that's where I mean, like, a lot of the American animation styles are underbaked. And like, okay, did you ever see, okay, when the Tracy Ullman show was on originally, did you ever see the Simpsons shorts originally?
Oh yeah, Bart looks so weird.
All the animation style was so terrible because they were trying, like, it took a lot, and because it like, even the early Beavis and Buttheads look terrible, and then the later ones look better, but the animation style is so.
They're trying to use an aesthetic in the later animated series,
right? They've established an aesthetic that was built from low.
Have you seen the Transformers 1 animated movie?
I haven't. I'm struggle to like look at stuff like that. It's like, I know I've only heard good things about the subject matter, but I can't, like, the Pixar shit like hurts my eyes. I can't look at it. And this is the shit that I'm getting to in terms of like, some of these aesthetics, I can't even look at them, bro. I can't, especially not for 2 hours.
Here's what I've decided is the trick to watching Transformers 1. I, similarly to you, I use a TV to display the computer. 4K is sufficient. That's a lot of real estate. I reduce that to like, a corner of the screen. So I just listen to it. And I kind of get this visual cue, but it's not really big enough that it has enough detail that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to watch this. But I can listen to it. And so the sound of that movie is incredible. It's very informative. And the story that emerges is really good. Like I didn't need an origin story. I didn't need an explanation for how Megatron became Megatron. But this is good. It's a different story. It's trying to tell something, explain something that somebody out there had asked. I wonder how Megatron grew to hate Optimus so much. Why did that happen? Like what happened? What happened
I
between
mean,
them?
but I thought they just did that in the Netflix. But I guess this is like before that, which is where I'm like, this is that's also why I haven't brought myself to watch it. In that, like you said, you don't feel like you need it, and it may have a good story, but it feel like we've gotten to the homework stage of franchises where I'm like, I don't like being assigned homework, and especially if it's like,
I mean, these things are things I'll either get around to eventually or I won't. And if it happens to be like the thing that's like, oh, I guess I'll watch this in that moment, then I watch them. But if not, then I don't worry about it too much. I know that
well, it's
eventually the
like,
internet's gonna be like, hey, you should watch this.
well, it's on that note, it's been telling me that it's good and that I should watch it, but I'm like, I just don't know, and so I don't really have a good reason to watch it yet.
Yeah,
Like maybe I'll check it out now that you've said it. But like I watched they just redid The Watchmen
yeah.
in animation. And I just watched the second part of that before I watched the Transformers 1, and I've seen every adaptation of The Watchmen, and I'm still like, okay, give me more before I need another, or before I need Transformers 1. In that I don't that's how I'm approaching media apparently in analyzing my own behavior. So that's where I'm like, I don't know. There's something about Transformers 1 that didn't resonate with me, that didn't like, it's almost like,
I think if you go into it as like, yeah, sure, I'll just put this on, you'll be pleasantly entertained. If you go into it like, okay, I need to watch this, like, let's see what's going on with this, then it's probably going to be more like, man, why did I do that?
well, but again, that's where I'm like,
That's
a lot
actually
of this stuff
that's
feels like homework to me, in that
yeah.
I just watched the first episode of What If season 2. And even though I enjoyed it, I'm like already exhausted by the prospect of watching the entire season. And it's only like a 9 episode season, mainly because I'm like, is this going to matter or not? Because I don't like the idea of like you telling me that these things don't matter and then having the possibility of you tying it in. So then if all this stuff doesn't get tied in, then I didn't miss anything. But if I don't watch it and then they tie it in, then I missed a bunch of shit. So then that's where if it's in this weird gap of like, I can't just watch it for enjoyment. And I was never into the What If franchise anyway. It was like interesting, but it was never one of my favorite comic books. So I don't really have huge attachments to it or anything. So
Season
because
3.
then, okay, for example, have you seen Deadpool versus or Deadpool and Wolverine?
Yes.
So they kind of tied it in with Loki, kind of not. And so this is where I'm like, if Loki was meant to be canon and you only kind of tied it in, then what are we even doing here? Because then that's where it feels like the MCU it doesn't really have a plan, and it's kind of just like reaching and seeing what people like and then attaching to like whatever people respond to, instead of actually having a solid plan for its own future, which is why that Blade movie keeps getting pushed back and changed and canceled. And no, they didn't cancel it. It just rewrote it. Like, if they actually had a plan, they wouldn't have this problem.
I want to believe that they talked to Wesley Snipes and he just laughed. I was like, Blade wouldn't do that. He would just kick their asses, or just inject like his personal intimacy with the character, and then they would do something about it. But I know that's not happening. I want to believe that it's because
I mean, it might.
they're gonna give us the absolute best like Blade this is the Marvel kung fu movie, Blade movie that we deserve. Not Shang-Chi. Like that was just like it was a
I
lot
don't
of
know.
fun, but it
I don't
wasn't like that
know.
wasn't the kung fu movie that we should
Yeah.
have got.
Well, and like some about it felt soulless. That's where I really wanted to enjoy Shang-Chi, but like something was missing. And it's not just because I don't like Aquafina, but like she wasn't even that much of the film, so I wasn't even really
Mulan
like
was a better kung fu movie.
um
But Blade is a perfect platform to deliver completely modern, like Matrix level fight choreography.
so here's okay.
Because if
I'm
anyone can
glad
move
you
like
brought
that, it's fucking Blade.
so I'm glad you brought up the Matrix in that one of the problems with fight choreography is that it needs to have a story that it's telling.
Yeah.
You can't just have pretty fight moves and like a good choreographer and expect to have good fight choreography in that. Okay, did you ever see the Netflix Daredevil
Yeah. That had a
show?
great fight choreography.
So the thing that his fight choreography did all the time was tell us like what he's feeling in that very moment, what he's thinking about without having to say it because they would like show it. And so there was definitely no movement was wasted, no scene was wasted, no shot was wasted. Um but then when you get to Iron Fist because um the dude, I forget his name, that played Danny didn't train, they couldn't do that.
Guy who sucked a lot.
Yeah, he not worth remembering his name. Um, so the fight choreography in Iron Fist was like not. It was all editing. They had to do the choreography through editing, and it's so obvious. And I think somebody broke it down in one fight scene. They had like 52 edits that were like jump cuts in just one fight. And it was like, you know, it was only between two people, but it was because um shitty fist couldn't get his moves right. Like they just had to basically record one move at a time and through the power of quick edits make it
And
seem like there was action happening.
jump cuts are so dangerous because if they're not done right, they don't help the story. They just make it. They just suck. Like the best way I've ever seen them. Like the camera doesn't move. It just is like a fly on the wall that doesn't move, and you see a room change because the people in it are like jump around, but they're just doing something in the room, and it very succinctly communicates the passage of time. But during a fight scene, which already happens within the time span of a blink of an eye, having a jump cut that's just it's like a waste of time. That's why I liked MacGyver. If he actually had to get into a fight, he just balled up his fist and socked him, and it was over. Because they didn't need to have a prolonged fight to move the story forward. They had way more interesting things to
Well,
do to move the story
but
forward.
that's also pre Hong Kong integrated choreography because
That's
it's
true.
like before American cinema integrated Hong Kong choreography, that was all the fight scenes. It would be like the biggest wind up you've ever seen in your life,
And
and the
pow.
person that they're about to hit not raise their hands and not respond and just wait to get hit. And it was like, then they took a ham and slapped it on the hood of a car and made it
Or
sound
a
like
bench.
right something. But it's like, the human eye and the ear are very stupid and will trick a human into thinking that's what a punch really looks and
I,
sounds
I
like.
read a Foley manual about that kind of thing, and they apparently there's this whole period during like the 30s during like the detective or the 40s, the detective era of cinema where they were using like a pastrami and they would slap a wooden bench. to get the sound, like an actual piece of meat. Like that's not even a joke. Like so when you say ham, it's like yeah, that's probably accurate. It's way more accessible than like pastrami.
Yeah, like I
All
think
of
it
all
was.
that sound design stuff, like early or even modern film sound design stuff, is really incredible. There's a couple of people on YouTube that have been popping up in shorts, and they're putting on these scenes from a movie, and they're just doing sound effects for the things that are happening in the background. Like when they show somebody walking, they just ball up a glove and they're like kind of mashing some ice, and you know they've got all these different little sound devices to create doors opening and closing. Really cool stuff. I mean, very creative. And like the stuff that always gets me is when they have like a special mic that is like tied to a like a mortar and pestle, and they use that to make big grinding sounds, and then they sound larger than life. It's crazy, like how easily we are tricked into believing what we're seeing sounds like something else. Especially like modern cars that play the sound of a revving engine through the sound system.
Have you heard of the McGurk effect?
McGurk effect?
Yeah.
No. How do you
So
spell
this
that?
is like
MC.
MCGURK. It's like something they teach in like year one of psychology in terms of like
Oh, cool. This is some weird like
how easy the
psychoacoustic
brain is
stuff.
to trick, and but also how much of our auditory understanding necessitates a visual um complement to ensure the information is being accurate, because it's like it's really easy to hallucinate auditory information
Yeah.
if you're not like, even if like you get it's even more easy to hallucinate auditory information if
You'd
you
have
get
to
a
be
visual.
trained to know what something looks like what it actually sounds like when it's doing a thing to know to be able to identify it. That's impossible.
Right. I mean, it's not it's like near impossible for a human, and like even with a artificial intelligence or um
Oh, I bet artificial
like
intelligence doesn't stand a chance.
right, and that's where I'm saying like even with like AI assisted modeling, it's not like the closest someone could get would probably be like 85 to 90% accuracy, and that 10% gap is going to be a huge gap of potential misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like, this is also why in video games and CGI, people, the mouth and the tongue placement and like the embouchure and all that, like is like the most difficult part of getting speaking right. It looks like there's so many muscles and finite movements like associated with each sound that also are not always visible on the outside. So like especially when we're talking about changing throat space, like the the space through which air moves between one's throat to
Oh
like
yeah.
change tone.
The
That's not,
formant.
yeah, that's not the only uh muscle movement that affects sound, but it's one of the more direct affecting sounds that's not visible from the outside. And that's where again it's like all of the, even down to while a person's thinking and they change their eye direction, or how their how their temples move up and down, or their ears when they squint or something, those things affect how a person is perceived when they're talking. And so if someone isn't actually being recorded and they're doing these things based on a model building it, this is where that uncanny valley is like really difficult to cross. Whereas like in God of War, they did Christopher Judge did the voice, but they also did motion capture. So all of the Kratos facial movements and the physical movements are actually not all the fight ones necessarily, but ones where he's in a movie. They're
I
like
can just
using
imagine
him.
him like hooked up to like a wire harness thing and swinging in like foam or a baseball bat for motion capture, the plastic bat.
Yeah, which again they did actually have physical sets and
Oh, that'd be
have
so
him doing a
cool.
lot of the motion. But then
I'm
I
serious. I
know,
could totally see him strapped into like into a harness and then like jumping
oh,
over
for I
things and
mean,
like,
because he did Teal'c, so you know
yeah,
he,
he's
But
totally a
again,
physically capable actor.
but
Oh,
the
that's
issue
so
is
cool.
the issue is then they like cut costs by having somebody do motion capture that is the same size but is not doesn't cost as much per hour. So
Yeah,
that's like, a lot of times they'll have
their insurance
one
policy is not
person.
nearly as expensive.
Well, yeah, exactly. And even with that, it's like sometimes they'll have one person do motion capture for as many people as possible, and then only if they really need like a different body type do they bring in a different person to do mocap. Um, which like with fighting games, a lot of times it's like one or two people, and then they just take those bodies and give them variation algorithmically. um,
I think it was either I think it was iRobot that made me think more about like the potential for motion capture. Like not that Lord of the Rings didn't have incredible motion capture, um, but there was something about the way they did that iRobot movie because they were able to make the robots move kind of like a human, but then they also made the robots move not like humans. And then the transition between the two was like very effortless. It didn't. There wasn't a moment of like, wait, what's going on? It was, oh, of course they can do that. These are robots. And I liked it because the human was still there. Like there was still some facial expression. At least they tried. It seemed.
well, and
I think I have my dilemma is I like stories about robots more than I like stories about like most people. I have a lot of trouble with modern cinema, like figuring out like who am I supposed to be rooting for, and it's not that I want like an obvious like yeah these are the good guys. I like anti-heroes, but a lot of the time I think there's this like an effort to make characters flawed, like very explicitly flawed, like almost too much. Like I think Christian Bale's Batman was clearly troubled, and he did a really good job of being troubled and trying to mask that. But then we get let's see, what was that terrible Moon Knight? That guy did a poor job of being mentally ill. Like they were just swinging too hard.
Yeah, that feels like it was like written by people who never like they wanted to make a TV show that was compelling, but didn't actually consult psychologists or psychiatrists to know the materials about which they're writing.
Kept
And so
it.
we
It
got
felt
this
like
like,
it's like this is what people think people who are mentally ill are like. Is that what I'm supposed to believe? Because it seemed like a not that I don't mind caricatures. Caricatures are fine, but that's like a that's kind of they took a serious version, a very extra version of like a multiple personality disorder, and just threw that guy into it. I didn't. It was just so uncomfortable. I don't remember how it ended. I just remember thinking like this can't win. There's no way that this story goes anywhere that's like that makes me feel like I didn't waste my time. At least the Batman stuff, I feel like there's some kind of resolution. I think the Batman, actually, the most recent one is actually I think it's my favorite Batman right now. It's like a real detective story.
well, did you watch The Penguin at all?
Penguin is fantastic.
Yeah, and I thought they did a really good job of then building the Reeves universe in terms of,
They built a lot of bridges in the Penguin series that can now be avenues to explore in either new season stuff or in movie form. There's a lot of additional background information to work with, I think.
well, and it's like it's almost like the Reeves version. If we thought Nolan's version was meant to be grounded and more realistic and not as um, comic booky, this one feels even more grounded and realistic and not as comic booky
Oh yeah,
in a way where I'm like, I wouldn't have anticipated that until I saw the Penguin and how they're grounding it, and like I couldn't imagine Zatanna coming up or some shit like that. And I would almost feel like Bane would be too far in this one, as grounded as it has become. But we'll see where it goes. But yeah, even like I said, even now it almost makes the Nolan one feel more comic booky than it did originally.
I think the Nolan Batman trilogy is a very faithful adaptation of the Frank Miller series, Year One, and they do a good job. Um, but I think the Batman, uh, like the way that the Riddler happens, I must not have paid attention the first time I watched it, because when I rewatched it after watching the Penguin series, I was like on the edge of my seat. There's and every time, every time Batman is stopping to think about stuff, it's like, holy crap, we're actually watching the gears turn. It's not just he knows everything and he's like so on it that we have to keep up. It's more like we don't even know what's going on and he has to figure it out. And that was this kind of element of tension that had been missing in every Batman movie. Like the tension in with Christian Bale is him staring at the camera, but with is it Robert Pattinson? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, with that guy, like he paces, he's like breathing, he's actually alive in that suit, and it takes him a while to figure it out because it's Batman, and it really means that like none of us are actually going to figure this out. We're all just waiting for him because this is beyond all of us. They did a really good job of communicating that. Like I didn't even recognize Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I completely forgot that he was the Penguin. I watched like 5 episodes of that show and didn't even realize that that was Colin Farrell is the Penguin.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of torn on this in that he did such an amazing job with that. And like obviously the makeup team did a really good job, but somebody was like, why don't they just cast ugly people?
I mean, Colin Farrell's not ugly enough for you.
I'm saying like instead of casting an ugly person, they cast Colin Farrell and did 8 hours of fucking makeup every day. So he would like appear ugly and appear to be this person who's like there's a ton of those people around in America, and surely some of them that look like that are good actors. Where I'm like, it's not to say that he took somebody's job, but it's like there is a fascination with beautiful people pretending to be ugly at the core of a lot of American film and like acting, even down to like whole movies just being about, oh, this girl has glasses and now we take off her glasses and fucking do her makeup and now she's pretty. Now that's a whole fucking movie. That's where I'm like,
That's like a classic teenage drama trope right there.
but then on top of that, they obviously have to cast like someone who's conventionally attractive to go through that. So the whole premise,
Yeah, the demetamorphosis to being not
right,
hot.
is like couched in knowing that the person they cast to play that role is conventionally attractive. So you know what I'm like?
I think the only way it works is if they have some really sweet character who, for whatever reason, was raised in isolation and then is brought back to America for like the last year of high school. I'm pretty sure that's a Lindsay Lohan story. So Disney has done that. We've got that. And Lindsay Lohan turned out to be like a serial Porsche crasher, and like seriously, I think she's on the record books for rear-ending people in Porsches more than like anyone else.
Right. Like we have enough data now to know that these things do not correlate with balanced lives and balanced people who are emotionally stable. So like what do we do about that in terms of knowing like that's not something obviously we should be pushing people towards, especially children, but then how do we remove those people as from it's like we look at them as elite right now. How do we stop looking at them as elite and start recognize them as like the broken, imbalanced people that they actually are?
I think part of it is that instead of seeing some fool crash their $300,000 supercar into a median in the rain, and endangering the lives of hundreds of people and tens of thousands of dollars of collateral damage to the state, all this stuff. Instead of seeing that person as being a dumbass, there's this tendency to validate their lifestyle because they can afford to do it. They must be doing something right. So whatever it is they're doing, emulate that.
Right. That is like how people respond to that type of shit.
It's like, man, do you see that idiot could just throw away $300,000 like nothing? I want to do what they do, man. Like, I mean, I would kick my own ass if I wrecked a $300,000 supercar. I would feel like such a failure behind the wheel. It's like, how the hell did I let that happen? Like, how does somebody survive that kind of, like, that should be like so ego crushing that they would never want to go near a camera or a vehicle ever again. They'd be afraid of those two things in proximity of each other. Nope, those fools have entire YouTube channels that make thousands of dollars a week.
So this is
That's
kind of a similar subject, not kind of. There is a story about a Cybertruck crashing and jumping the curb, immediately catching on fire, killing 3 people.
it got off the ground.
I think so.
How fast
But
was it
the issue
going?
that's they don't know yet, and so the issue, so the fact that you don't even know about this is crazy because the American media is like suppressing it, even though it happened, I think, in California. But the only reason I even knew about it is because of a fucking British news story where they're running it, and then somebody pointed it out, like, "Hey, this Cybertruck crashed and immediately caught on fire, and American media is not running with it. What's going on here?" So like, it's wild to see how information. We all know information is being manipulated, and information is obviously not free in terms of how, like, yeah, we can get on and basically go on any web page, but the algorithms that feed us information are constructed, and maybe it's not by a direct person, or it's probably done automatically, but they all generally end up feeding the same things. And the fact that they aren't feeding people this
How did it
story
get between
about,
those two trees? Those two trees are closer
bro,
than
that's what
the
they're
length
trying
of
to
the
figure out.
Cybertruck.
It had to be going so fast that it caught air, is what, and what they're trying to determine, because they don't want the Cybertruck to take the hit. Now they're trying to blame it on the kids and see, oh, were the kids just driving that fast and that terribly? And so that's what the narrative they're trying to construct before it really hits mainstream American news is. And like,
I'm actually impressed that
oh,
that it didn't take down the
bro.
tree.
So this is where shit gets really crazy. All the kids involved are families of like multimillionaires, and all their homes are like, this was in the article. This, so when they start including information like this, you know shit is crazy when they're like, all of the kids involved lived in homes worth more than multiple $1 million a piece. And it's like, oh, Tesla's fucked. They just killed 3 rich kids. Like, and one was severely injured and he still may die. So it's like, these weren't just any people. Like, we don't know who they are, but white wealthy people know who they are. And the fact that they put that shit in the articles the way they did is where I'm like, this, it's funny to me because I can read between the lines, but I don't think a lot of people are seeing what's happening with rich people who have bought these Cybertrucks. And it was like the last scam that Elon has been able to get away with. He's trying to scam them with the Optimus, but I think enough of them are realizing that they're just basically remote controlled and they're not autonomous, that they're not willing to put them in their homes, because it's like, if you do, then you basically are just giving, excuse me, Tesla a camera into your home. And if you're famous, Elon's definitely going to look at that shit. Like, you know, he goes and looks at Kim Kardashian's camera, like her Optimus camera, which is where, I don't know if she's still taking videos with it and posting, but it's like, I don't think she's that stupid either. I'm sure she's like leveraging the fact that Elon wanted to give her an Optimus to get relevant briefly again. But that's where I'm like, I don't think she would be stupid enough to leave Optimus in a place where it's going to see some shit she doesn't want it to see. I mean, even though her entire vagina is on the internet, like, that, I'm sure she still wants some privacy. Like,
Oh
even when
god.
people have their entire vaginas on the internet, I'm sure they still want moments where they don't have a camera on them. Like, maybe she does want camera all the time. I don't know, but Um, because
I'm
then,
sure she's already figured out how to monetize it, and it's like on a
right,
very,
yeah, she already
very
monetized it for sure.
highly elite level, and people spend tens of thousands of dollars just so they can get an alert to go have their retinas scanned so they can watch, the toilet cam because she's about to drop the deuce and she ate burritos last night. Somebody's paying out the wazoo for that privilege. And none of us get to know about it because none of us could afford that shit. No one, who you have to be Elon Musk to be able to afford to just burn $30,000 a minute or whatever to watch someone take a shit. That's what he's probably into. When you have everything, what do you want to do except watch the weirdest stuff out there? He's not into jumping out of airplanes. He's trying to build a spaceship.
Well, and we know based on his log, he's most of the time he's on Twitter or he's playing Diablo 4 or Elden Ring. And it's like all these things are almost like digital footprints where is he if he's not paying somebody to do them these things for him, then we know how sad his life actually is. And we know he's not working 24 hours a day. And we know he's not working when he's tweeting. So there's all these things about the myth of Elon Musk that him coming out from the
Man,
tower
isn't
is like
Elden Ring one
proving
of those
wrong.
games that you gotta like grind the living crap out of to build your stuff so you can go do like really grindy dungeon type
Yes,
quests?
yes, it is. And he posted his shit, and everybody who played it is like, "Oh, you're a dumbass," because he he thinks that everybody is vulnerable to his invisible clothing.
Looks like the
But
average Elden Ring player. Misallocated stats, strange gear setup.
yeah, so he was getting roasted when he came out and was trying to like show how smart he was because he gave all of his character like all intelligence and shit. It's like, dude, that's not how games work. Intelligence doesn't always mean, oh, your character's smarter. It's like it's for specific functions, and the fact that he just wanted to like have his character have 100 intelligence because he's Elon is like the sign of someone who actually is low intelligence and doesn't understand the thing that they're doing. So
So I've read about is a guide to developing super dwellers for Fallout, and it involves staying in the starter area, the training area, and training up intelligence first, and then doing everything else. Because if you do that, apparently it makes everything else train faster. But only in that certain training area until you reach the limits of that space, and then you have to go out into like the real game, and that's like it takes like a something stupid like an extra 60 hours or something dumb or 48 to 60 hours to do it, but it's apparently it makes the rest of the game really easy. But
well,
only
and it's like
but
on
that's like Fallout, and that's a really dedicated game
right.
universe, like a
Well, but
really.
that's also where if you get 100 intelligence, it gives you options in the game that if you don't have 100 intelligence, you don't get them. So, um, Fallout 3, I think that's, oh no, it was New Vegas. I had 100 intelligence and ended the game without weapons being fired or anybody going to war. And it's like, you know, only in shit like that where you're not trying to kill people and actually trying to use intelligence in that manner. Does intelligence as a statistic in an RPG play out like that?
Man,
It's very rare that it
you
plays
gotta
out like
love
that.
Bethesda for creating a story where if you use your intellect, you might be able to create a character that can survive the post-apocalyptic dystopia and convince everyone else not to kill each other.
But he needed he or she needed intellect, but also charisma.
Yeah,
So it's like you can have intellect, but if you don't have charisma, you're not going to be able to convince people of your smart idea.
and a little
So
bit of luck goes a long way.
that's absolutely correct. Which even then, um, I feel like their luck mechanic is really good at identifying the notion of like the concept of luck in that Um, I feel like luck is this force of nature in that it's not quantifiable, but it's also undeniable in terms of its existence. Like luck definitely exists, and it can be framed as a pure numbers game, but the pure numbers game doesn't actually explain it when you try to test it, and
I
there's
think I
always
think
some
luck is like
element.
is a facet of something that it's like similar to plot armor. Like in a story,
Right. I mean,
it's
but
like
that of
we
course,
can't quantify that. We know that it's there. Some people are lucky; they've got like really incredible plot armor.
but that's a chicken or egg scenario in terms of like people who were lucky in real life pre-existed stories about lucky people.
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying? Like luck isn't something that was invented in stories. Luck is something that happened in real life that stories represent as a means of showing how it plays out in a specific scenario.
sure.
Because then this is,
I think luck is the thing that you or it like projects into the future, whereas plot armor is the way that we describe something that already happened.
but further than that, this is where the difference between events and a story is a beginning, middle, and an end, in addition to a relevant um, trajectory of the narrative to have some sort of meaning. In that, if I just recount to you everything I did in a day, that's not a story. Right? And so this is where, in terms of like learning, going to school to learn how to tell stories in different mediums, um, it was interesting to like Canterbury Tales was something that was often used as an example to show how you can weave stories within larger stories and then have um, meaningful stories within meaningless stories, but the story still needs to have a beginning, middle, and an end to be a story. And otherwise, like, again, this is like annals and chronicles versus um, a novel or versus a biopic or a biography, and these things establishing.
I wonder how many times Sarah Connor has been shot because she definitely has plot armor, and it's not really lucky to get shot.
Sorry, I knocked out my fucking microphone.
No, I was just thinking like how many times has Sarah Connor been shot? Because she's definitely got plot armor, but it's definitely not lucky to get shot. Then again, when she gets shot, it's never in a vital area. You know, she never gets shot in like some organ that has to be surgically removed or is life threatening. She can just be like bandaged and takes.
No, she's not lucky she got shot. She's lucky that the kid she's pregnant with happens to be the kid that travels back into in time. And otherwise, if she wasn't pregnant with him, the T-800 might have come back and succeeded, because this is the issue in that, like, because of the framing of when we see the story, um the inevitability
So
of
she's not the chicken; she's the egg.
she's both.
She's the chicken and the egg.
Yes. This is why Terminator is such a great story, in that um perfect time loops are possible, and the issue being the perfect time loop would not necessarily play out the same way each time.
It couldn't.
So um there in watching the perfect time loop chronologically forward, we get a sense of one iteration of it playing out in this iteration, eventually, um, what was it? Marcus Phoenix switching roles. So that's how they broke the perfect time loop. Is like
Oh,
this
when they
is
gave that dude the machine's heart, the
John
biomech ability,
Connor's, yeah.
they gave John Connor his heart at the end.
And so that's where you like seemingly break the perfect time loop, assuming that wasn't always part of the time loop. So this is like it's hard. Matrix is an example that's not a physical time loop, but it's a
What was it? That was a
societal
what was that
time loop.
Terminator Salvation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Salvation
Salvation.
is the
That's a
the
really good Terminator movie too.
right.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's a really good one.
but it's also
Because
like
he travels forward in time too, sort of. From the moment like
um,
he's executed and put on ice, and then he's revived as a machine that he doesn't realize he's a machine.
yeah, which again, it's like I think it was hard for people to watch Genesis because a lot of dumbass Americans went into Genesis thinking that they were gonna like somehow pull it off and win, which is
No.
obviously not possible. It's like Titanic. Like you know how this is gonna fucking end because we watched
I mean, we're just
them.
gonna get another Terminator movie. That's how it works. Like,
Well, but in terms of like where we are in the story, like we haven't even hit Skynet taking over. So if the Terminators are here, Skynet already takes over. So we can't avoid that.
yeah.
And so the inevitability of being in this perfect time loop is like we're watching these protagonists
Well,
go
eventually,
through it.
I think what happens is the continuum keeps cycling until eventually the humans are able to break the or get the loop down to they can push to the moment that Skynet brings their time travel device online, like the real one, the original one, and they're not able to move it forward in time because it doesn't last long enough to move forward in time. So if they can destroy that, then the time loop is broken. But
No, but here's the issue. The time loop always is there. Time always moves forward immediately after the time loop is created. We're just watching from the perspective of someone who's still stuck in it.
well, yeah.
So this is why, like, in terms of this is the beauty of giving the audience a specific perspective, but
Yes.
in that we have to like acknowledge like we
Oh
are not
yeah, no, I know, but like the if we work out the science fiction continuum, if we work out the problem or the quandary of the science fiction continuum, time travel continuum, eventually the opposition to the machine is able to get to the point where the machine is finally able to travel in time because they're able to keep pushing forward. We don't know
right.
how far that could
Exactly.
be 10,000 years in the
We don't
in
know
the
when.
storyline
We
of
just know it does.
it just exists, and they're able to send something back in time to create their time travel, railway, uh, whatever ultranet, and they can now exist across time, and but eventually, at least as long as the story has been going so far, eventually the humans find the machine, and there's one variation where Batman destroys Skynet. So, so there's a bunch of variations where they keep pushing the timeline further closer to the origin of the time travel device.
Yeah, I have a Terminator Transformers crossover comic. So yeah, that's exactly the issue. Is like
How
in
far
this
off in the
time
future
loop.
is it?
No, this what I'm saying. In this time loop, everything's happens in the different variations because it's the time loop and
Yeah,
it can keep going perpetually.
yeah.
So it's like every time loop can have a different variation, which is why the perfect time loop is this beautiful mechanism. But also when we're watching someone go through it, it's really difficult to fathom that there's already a future that's happened after the time loop. We just don't know what it is yet. So
Or how
we're just
far
not
off it
shown it.
goes. Like we don't
Right,
know how many
exactly.
John Connor
Exactly. We
variables
don't
there were. There could be like dozens of leaders of the future that Skynet's trying to kill. We're only focused on Sarah Connor and her kid.
or
Um,
time loops within time loops. And
yeah,
so
There could
That's
be
also
there could be an entire variation of Terminators in like South America or in Europe or Southeast Asia or in China, like just going around looking for the special leaders of tomorrow who are going to galvanize humans and get them to make represent an actual threat in the future. Like, I mean, 10,000 years from now when they finally destroy Skynet, because
and this is where the beauty of that story being written the way it is like Dyson um being attacked by Sarah Connor is the same as Cisco starting the Bell riots. And so we see these like well-written, perfect time loop stories, and they don't happen very often, but we hold on to them as a society because they were so well done and they were so perfectly woven that then even down to like the capacity, there's only a couple of stories you can even compare like that in terms of their capacity to tell a perfect time loop story, because Back to the Future almost goes to a perfect time loop, but it's like more of a multiverse story before they were trying to do multiverse stories correctly. And so there's like a confluence of incorrect physics, incorrect theoretical physics, that now that's where like Endgame or Infinity War makes fun of Back to the Future because their frameworks were clearly wrong. But when they were making them, that was the best frameworks they could work with. And so that's why it's funny, to bring it full circle, to see how science affects the stories that are written and vice versa. A lot of the modern understanding of multiverse comes post Star Trek and the Terran universe, and like they started doing multiverse stories in media and comic books before science had really started to lean into the multiverse theory. And it was more so like we were getting close to I think they were getting close to string theory, but they had not really started broaching multiverse theory as like a serious concept until I think it was like 80s, 90s that theoretical physicists were really starting to get serious about that as a concept, and mainly because the things that we were able to observe in the universe got to be more diverse. So things that were like theorized, like Hawking radiation, started to get validation. And, I think it was like the effects of a black hole this is when they started to call things dark matter, because they could see the effects but couldn't observe what was causing the effect directly.
I
And
think they did have those stories, but they just didn't know what it was, and they called it the Twilight Zone.
Exactly.
Like there's so many
but that's around the
Twilight
same time
Zone episodes, I think, that you could just transplant into modern context and they would work.
Yeah.
Just change the clothes, give them modern technology, give them new hair, and and colorize, because can't have black and white television anymore.
Outer Limits too. I don't know if you ever watched that, but
Outer
they were
Limits
just
is
straight
great.
up multiverse stories. Sliders.
Yeah, Sliders is fantastic.
Was like,
that's like that's the best.
Fucking Quantum Leap.
Quantum Leap was also really good. That was a time travel story too.
Right. But it's time travel and multiverse, in that because he was going back and
didn't they reboot that? I think I saw
they
it.
did. But his issue was that he would go back but needed to change something. So he was like, this is why Sam was such a big part of it, in that Sam would give him updates on the timeline to see if he had changed it yet, and only when he made the change that needed to happen could he jump out. So that's where it was like Sam was like making all these branches basically, and like I forget the guy's name that carried. He would like pop in with the little
Dean Stockwell.
yeah, Dean Stockwell would pop in and like have his fucking cigar or whatever and his little yellow thing, like little
See,
60s remote control that was meant to be like a futuristic device. But it's like he was monitoring the timeline, and so that's where again it would only be once Sam made the change and the timeline was like altered the way that needed to be changed, could he jump out to the next one.
Let's see, Al,
yeah.
Al. What a great character. Nobody else can see him, but he can talk some smack.
Oh, and shit.
He was the voice of Duke Nukem on Captain Planet and the Planeteers.
I want to say
Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Briscoe County Jr.
I liked that show a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that was like slightly multiverse-ish too.
Bruce Campbell made a show recently called Hysteria. It takes place during the satanic panic of the 80s. It's about a high school rock band that embraces goth and heavy metal culture, and all hell breaks loose. Dean Stockwell's has quite the list of credits, man. 206 acting credits.
Yeah, he was like in a lot of stuff.
He did everything. Like literally everything. He was the voice of Tim Drake in Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker.
Well, I guess the Stockwells were a Hollywood family.
Okay.
And that's, it's funny to see. I don't know. I don't even want to call it the reemergence, but there are definitely seemingly like star children of actors and actresses that are like
he was on the Twilight
next generation
into the 89.
That's not
series.
Surprising. I feel like he was probably on Murder, She Wrote too.
Yeah, he was. One episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, pretty sure. But it's like it seems like there are people who want to keep up the tradition of acting families and are like taking that shit seriously. Like what's the name? John Washington, Maya Hawke, like I know I saw somebody else lately too, but it's like, oh, there's like the next generation of Wayans. Yeah, there's like a whole nother like Damon Wayans Jr. has been doing Rush Hour.
Is there like a Mario Van Peebles Jr. or a Melvin Van Peebles the second?
Yeah. But that's where I'm like, I feel like it's a race between the Wayans family, the Jackson family, and the Knowles family for like the most talented people in concentration. But I can't think of any families more talented than the Wayans in that much concentration, where it's like the only ones that are even coming close are like Beyonce's and the Jacksons. But even then, I think they're past the Jacksons in terms of like
Wesley
just pure
Snipes'
concentration.
oldest is an actor. think it might be a technicality. He was only in Mo Better Blues when he was 1 year old.
I was gonna say, like, I haven't heard of him in anything, so I don't know
He
how
has
much
one
that
acting
counts.
credit as a 1 year old, as a baby in 1990.
Well, just because somebody acts doesn't mean they're successful either. Because this is where I'm like, Damon Wayans Jr. has got like a whole TV show, like,
Yeah.
and I mean, now I think he's on a second one, but it's with Senior now too. So it's like, Junior had his own whole own thing, and now they're doing like, it's funny to see Damon Wayans Sr. as an old man being funny on TV with his son as an like playing an old man.
So all of Will Smith's kids are either musicians or
Yeah,
actors.
and the Smiths too. But there's only four of them, where there's like 1,000 Wayans. So many Wayans.
They're like a whole production company.
Yeah, because Marlon's got like a bunch of kids, and some of them are actors. I know, like, um, fucking Keenan.
Oh, this is interesting. So I searched for Will Smith children, and then Google says people also search for children of Martin Lawrence, children of Trey Smith,
Well, and like Martin Lawrence's
children of Diddy,
daughter got married to Eddie Murphy's son just recently.
children of Tommy Lee Jones.
That it's like that feels like aristocratic shit though.
Now Google's just listing off movie stars that the children of, and then a list of movie stars. So this is just Google being Google. Children of Jay-Z. Yeah, they have kids, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Blue Ivy. At least one.
Rumi, Blue Ivy, and Sir.
I feel like they're gonna be the last generation of like celebrities that make money off of it. I don't know how much longer that shit's gonna be viable. It feels like Kai Cenat is like the biggest and last.
Well, it depends on. I think it depends on a lot of factors. Obviously, it depends on how long the industry at large is willing to do big production, or how long it takes for small productions to catch up and look like big productions.
Right. I mean, I feel like that just happened though. Like,
Yeah, I know.
This is when it like we are in the week in which it just happened, and we like saw McLuhan's vision of that convergence. Like, I think people have been looking and waiting for it to happen, but I literally feel in my bones like it just happened with Kai Cenat. Like, mainly being all these executives are now running to his platform, where I'm like, when this dude was just a Twitch streamer, the idea of like big companies going to him to try to put their shit on his platform would have been a joke. But now we're in that. And so his production has gone up behind the camera so that in front of the camera it looks the same, even though it's obvious that everything has just scaled up and up and up and up, and it keeps scaling up. And so when they're going through this Jeff Winger, like a bunch of extra work to make it look like you didn't do any work, to me, that's like, now the small production has become the big production to look like the small production, and the snake is eating its own tail right now.
Oh man. Well, we're in for 4 years where the Onion can report actual news. Like, this stuff's about to get really wild. I don't think that there's going to be any problem with the media generating anything. It'll also be okay though. I don't think the world's on fire.
No, it's not. If anything, it's like closest to world peace. Even though that's where, as animals, the closer we get to peace, the more chaotic shit looks.
Yeah. Well, it's uncomfortable because it's not natural.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do with my hands? I need a gun. I need a gun. Shoot something.
This hammer's not enough. Oh man. Yeah. Big ups to world peace. Maybe we can actually have this for once. It'd be kind of cool, right? Like for the first time in our lives and in hundreds of years, probably. That'd be fucking rad.
Maybe I'm just optimistic because I just watched The Watchmen.
Man, if you left watching the Watchmen feeling optimistic, then